Ladies and gentlemen, great to have you back. I'd like to go over a quick review with you guys. Talk about our multiplication and division rules for integers. Here I have written in a lot of words, so please abbreviate if you feel the need, if you don't want to write all these words out. But I would encourage you to write them down, even if you think you know them, just so you can reference them the several days that we're going to use them. Okay, so here we go. The multiplication rules are the first three numbers, and the division rules are the next three. So, our rules state this. A positive number times a positive number will always equal a positive number. For instance, you might have 6 times 2. You all know that's 12. You've known that for years and years and years. Number 2 says a negative number times a negative number will always equal a positive number. So negative 2 times negative 6 will equal positive 12 every time, folks, every time. And lastly, a positive number times a negative number will always equal a negative number. This one's in red for a specific reason. It's the only one that's different. The only way when you're multiplying to end up with a negative number is if one of your numbers are negative. Or let's say you're multiplying 3 numbers together. One of them is negative. Okay, you need or all 3 of them are negative. You need an odd number of the numbers that you're multiplying together to be negative. And I'll show you what I mean about that later on. Number 4, to our division rules. Okay, same exact rules. A positive number divided by a positive number will always equal a positive number. I'm not going to go through the last two. They're just the same as 2 and 3, except they're for division. But I'm assuming you can read. So, let's talk about the first example here. 3 times negative 4. In case any of you were wondering, because I'm sure you all were, I'm going to prove to you here why a positive number times a negative number has to be negative. Multiplication, as you know, and as you learned a long time ago, is just addition. So what you have here is 3 negative 4s. So in case you wanted to write it all out, you can make it look like this. Negative 4 plus negative 4 plus negative 4. And folks, we know negative 4 plus negative 4 is negative 8. And then if you add another negative 4 on, you get a negative 12. Look at that. It's negative. If you had just listened to me and used your second multiplication rule right here, you could have said, well, I know what 3 times 4 is. It's 12. But since one of my numbers is negative, my answer's got to be negative 12. Do you see how that saves time so that you don't have to write this kind of stuff out all the time? All right, as an example, rule number 2. A negative number times a negative number will always equal a positive number. That means, like right here in this example, that negative 6 times negative 7 is definitely positive 42. And lastly, a positive divided by a negative is always going to be a negative. So put that negative symbol out front, and then all you have to do is 100 divided by 5, which is 20. Okay, so that's using the rules a little bit. But now, I want to touch on something just a little bit different here. Okay, I'm going to go through 2 examples, and then I'm going to assign you a few problems that you have to work on, and that you're going to have to bring in our next class period. That's going to be your homework. So, 2 final questions for you. Before solving each of these, please tell me whether the product or the quotient will be a positive or a negative number. So before you even solve it, you should be able to tell me whether the result from this right here is going to be positive or negative. How do we figure that out? Some of you might be asking. Well, the way I like to look at it is you take all these numbers and you figure out how many negatives you have. If I multiply that negative number times that negative number, I'm going to get a positive number. Okay? And if I multiply this negative number times this negative number, I'm going to get a positive number. So what we're seeing here is those negatives are canceling each other out. So essentially we're left with all in this case, we're left with all positive numbers. So when you multiply them, you know you're going to end up with a positive answer. So all you really have to do is forget about your negatives and say 4 times 4, which is 16, times 2, which is 32, times 2, which is 64, times 1, which is 64, times 2, which is 128. So beforehand, before you solve this, you should have been able to tell me, hey, my answer is going to be positive because I have 4 negative numbers being multiplied together. Since you have an even number of negative numbers being multiplied together, each pair of negatives is going to cancel out, and you're going to end up with positives. Okay? So, number 2, I think you should try this on your own. Pause the video. Try and tell me what, whether the answer is going to be positive or negative. Then evaluate it. Then turn the video back on and see what I have to say. All right, folks, let's do the top first. Let's try and figure out, is the top going to be positive or negative? Well, we have a negative number times a negative number. We know from our rules that that is going to end up being a positive product. We're then going to multiply that positive number by another positive number, this 3 right here. So we know we're going to get a positive numerator, okay? But the bottom is obviously going to still be a negative numerator. Oops, I don't know why I had that right there. Whoop. Sorry about that. Positive numerator, negative denominator. So a positive divided by negative is always negative. So my answer in the end better have a negative sign in front of it. Now let's talk about it. Negative 10 times negative 50 is negative 500. And let me write some of this out for you so I'm not just talking. Okay, so negative 500, and you still have that 3 left over. And on the bottom you have a negative 3. Oh, forgive me. This is a positive 500. Positive 500. Because my negative 10 times my negative 50, those two negatives canceled out. So forgive me. This is 500 times 3 divided by negative 3. Second to last step here. 500 times 3 is 1500. And you still have your denominator, that is negative 3. And let's go one more step. We can simplify. Divide it by 3. Divide it by 3. We know our answer is negative. So you better not forget that negative sign. It's negative 500. Fantastic. Folks, if you get an answer that's not negative, that should be a red flag, because at the beginning up here, we determined that we had to have a negative answer. If you did not get a negative answer, make sure you go back, check your work. You might have to try it again. Alright guys, appreciate you listening here. I'm going to give you one final set of problems, and I'm not going to do them with you. You have to do these 8 problems. So if you would, write these in your notes. This is your homework assignment. Once you're done watching the video, hopefully you took good notes. You might not even have to watch it again. You can just work your way 1 through 8. Tomorrow I'll be checking it. Guys, have a great night, and we'll see you tomorrow.